We have waited seemingly forever, so we have finally arrived at the week where we will talk Ohio State, Notre Dame as much as we possibly can here. We want to make sure that you're locked in with Kevin Noon and Steve Hellwagon as well this week, because if you are a college football fan, it gets no better in terms of non-conference matchups, and these two have been more rivals off the field than on the field, but they get together, every 20 years, 30 years, 60 years. That's what the history has been for almost 100 years between Ohio State and Notre Dame, two of the top brands in not just college football, all of sports. Buckeyes live right here at the Voice of College Football. Leave those comments and questions. We appreciate your support as well. Kevin Noon right next to me, Buckeye Huddle, the Big Me podcast, Tale of the Tape. We will find out when that's released, most likely today. Tale of the Tape, got to catch that, especially for this kind of matchup. And then College Football Playbook right here on YouTube. We will have all the particulars on the banners because, again, this is the week to lock in. Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts.com, 247 Sports. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Doing great.
We revved up. Okay, here we go. Steve, your initial thoughts about Ohio State and Notre Dame. This doesn't come around too often. We saw it last year in Columbus, of course.
Yeah, for a while, for 60 years, they didn't play each other from the 30s until the 90s. And now it's become kind of old hat. This will be the sixth meeting in the last almost 30 years. So between Fiesta Bowls and a couple of a home and home series, this is the sixth time that they're going to play back to 1995. Ohio State now leads the all-time series 5-2. And you have to be 87 years old to have been alive when Notre Dame last defeated Ohio State in 1936 in South Bend. This is the third time Ohio State is going to South Bend to play a game. Lost there in 1936, 7-2, and won there in 1996, 29-16. I was in attendance at that game in 1996. It was my second year as the editor of Buckeye Sports Bulletin. Went in Friday night, went to the Linebacker, which is the touristy thing to do, just east of the Notre Dame campus, and don't remember a whole lot about it other than Demetrius Stanley returned the opening kickoff 85 yards, and Ohio State immediately went up 7-0. And ended up winning that game, as we said, 29-16. I could just tell how defeated Lou Holtz was after the game. I think he had pinned a lot of hope that his Notre Dame team would win that game in South Bend, and they just got out physicaled and out toughed. And Ohio State blitzed the heck out of Ron Pallas in that game, and just kind of dominated the game, 29-16. Of course, Lou Holtz, at the end of that season, would announce his, retirement, walk away from Notre Dame, and was out of the sport for a couple of years, and got back in at South Carolina. And Ohio State fans know how that went because he beat the Buckeyes twice in the Outback Bowls at South Carolina. But the Golden Gnome and Notre Dame were no match for Ohio State in the mid-90s. Buckeyes have won 2 Fiesta Bowls, won last year's game 21-10. Last year's game would be, if you put it on, would be a certain cure for insomnia because that was about the most boring game I can recall. And Notre Dame had no offense with ousted Alabama quarterback Tyler Buckner trying to lead the boys up and down the field there last year. That was the game, obviously, that Jackson Smith, the Jigba, suffered the injury, and his whole season was kind of curtailed after that point, and kind of paved the way for Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, and even Xavier Johnson, who caught a touchdown pass in that game to take over. So that kind of sets the stage of the history of the rivalry, and obviously both teams in the top 10. I think it's the fourth or fifth time. 96, the 2 Fiesta Bowls, and last year 4 straight times. This will be the 5th straight time that the two teams have played, with both teams ranked in the national top 10. And Ohio State's hoping, obviously, to keep its winning streak going against Notre Dame. With this one, Ohio State installed, I think, as an early 3-point favorite. I haven't looked in the last day or two to see about line movements, but that tells you on a neutral field that the odds makers like Ohio State by 6. But I'm sure we can get into all the matchups and everything, but that in a nutshell sets the tone. I mean, as you said, top 5 in every category, wins, winning percentage, probably, close on national championships for Ohio State, and then Heisman Trophy winners, certainly. So any category, All-Americans, NFL draft picks, any category you want to measure it, these are 2 of the all-time great programs.
Kevin.
Yeah, looking forward to the game. Obviously, we all try to draw the historical perspective, but when foot meets leather, it doesn't really mean much. It's a different team every time that they go out there, but a lot of excitement for this game. I did not go to that Notre Dame game at South Bend. I was working in Columbus for the ABC affiliate, and certainly was monitoring it as we had to do a pre and post game show for it. I did go to the one at Ohio Stadium, but looking forward to seeing what comes out of it. I watched the NC State game yesterday. I will probably, when I'm done with this show, make a sandwich and put on Peacock and watch the Central Michigan game, as well as I work on Tale of the Tape, which will come out tomorrow. I'm woefully behind this week. This is just obviously a much larger week than Western Kentucky or Youngstown State or Indiana, and I want to make sure that I'm confident in the words that I put in there. So I'm taking an extra day to really dive in on statistics. A lot of people are trying to talk about where some of the numbers for Notre Dame are right now, and I'm quick to remind them that they have played 4 games to everybody else's 3 at this point. So let's try and keep apples to apples when we're looking at things. But a tremendous week of college football coming up. Week 4 has got so many fantastic games. Almost makes me wish that I could be home with the remote and a cooler of beer next to me to watch all of those games. But alas, I'll be in South Bend watching by far the game that I'm the most interested in and ready to talk about it.
Kevin, is there anything that happened against Western Kentucky or just the overall proficiency, explosiveness, offensive and defensively that you think matters going toward this one?
I think it was important that Ohio State was able to show what it could do against a passer like Austin Reed and a receiver like Malachi Corley. I already know that I've drawn the ire of a lot of Notre Dame fans, and that's fine, but I like Western Kentucky's receiver room over Notre Dame's receiver room. I like Sam Hartman over Austin Reed, but I think Austin Reed is a tremendous quarterback, and he's somebody that will be an NFL quarterback, in my opinion. But when you sit there and you look at Malachi Corley, there's not a lot of Malachi Corleys out there in the nation. So Ohio State's ability to get to him, I mean, maybe not necessarily with the sacks, and I certainly am hearing that left and right. Well, they're not sacking, but even yesterday at interviews, whether or not, I don't remember if it was Ryan Day or if it was Jim Knowles talking about getting back there and disrupting his rhythm. I mean, and that was really important. Now, with that being said, Notre Dame's offensive line is about 20 times better than Western Kentucky's. Joe Alt is a NFL first-round pick type of guy at their left tackle. So I don't necessarily expect Ohio State to have the same kind of success in getting to the quarterback, certainly with 4. But, I think that we saw a bit of a game plan of what Ohio State needs to do to limit the passing game. And then, on the flip side, I know I'm getting ahead to talking about Notre Dame more than Western Kentucky. I think that, Ohio State was able to do a good job of keeping Western Kentucky's run game in check, but we're also looking at a very different world. Audric Estime is not the type of player that's going to end up at Western Kentucky. Ohio State's going to have its hands full there. But as I'd said, probably on this show, certainly on other shows, the 63 points was all well and good for Ohio State, even if 14 of them being on defense. But the biggest statement was going to be made if Ohio State was going to be able to keep that offense in check, which it largely did.
I'll just chime in. I think what you heard the players talk about after the game and the coaches yesterday, Coach Day and Coach Knowles, was just how a game like that was important to build their confidence, to know that they are capable of playing lights out football. The first 2 games, there were just too many missed assignments, mental and physical breakdowns, I think, to say that, this was a legitimate, national championship caliber team. I don't think a 53-point blowout of Western Kentucky necessarily affirms that or confirms that, but it does make you come away with the idea that this team is capable of much more than it showed in the first 2 weeks. And I think that you also had guys who are starting to grow into roles that, that fit their capability. And, the Ohio State's best players stepped up. And I think that was what was important. Jack Sawyer didn't have a sack as a for instance, but he provided just relentless pressure and made it a miserable day for Austin Reed, the Western Kentucky quarterback. So when I look at it, I just thought that they put their best foot forward at the right time going into the first matchup showdown game of the season. They were playing lights out football, and you come away from Western Kentucky game feeling much better about the trajectory of this season, understanding that they certainly have not arrived yet. I think both these teams come into this game. They both have one Power 5 win, Ohio State over Indiana, Notre Dame over North Carolina State, both on the road. NC State to me looks like a 6-6, 7-5 team. Maybe Indiana to me looks like a 4-8 team. And so, what did that really prove? Not a whole lot. Both of them have to step up and play, at a higher level this week to win that game. We're going to see who accomplishes that. There are so many keys and so many matchups we can get into. And I know we've got a Notre Dame guy coming on here after 11:30 to kind of share that side of it. But to me, I came away feeling much better about Ohio State than what I'd seen the first 2 weeks.
Two basic ways to line up the matchups would be player versus player or position versus position that don't play in conflict against each other, quarterback versus quarterback, or you go the other way, who is going to be competing on the field against each other, offensive line, defensive line. The most obvious contrast would be the experience level of Sam Hartman, Kevin, and Kyle McCord, who is facing his first hostile environment. Our apologies go out to the faithful out there in Bloomington. First hostile environment, and Kyle McCord obviously played a much better game than anything we saw in the first 2 weeks last week. But Sam Hartman's played, he probably is the most experienced of any quarterback in college football at this point.
Yeah, and I think that the hostile environment even speaks more for Ohio State's young offensive line in terms of experience as well. I mean, you have a first-year center with Carson Hensman, and the communication is going to be important. And it doesn't matter if it's 80-20 Notre Dame fans, 70-30, 60-40, or some flavor in between all of that. It's going to be loud. It's going to be raucous there. I mean, it's one of the cathedrals of college football. So there's going to be a lot of importance for Ohio State to have all of its procedural things down. And for Kyle McCord, there's going to be a lot of pressure. And I think that coming off of that Western game is going to be really good for his psyche. It's quarterbacking can be such a feel business at times, and I think he has the feel for it, and that'll be important. And we know that Marvin and we know Emeka are going to be out there, and they're going to run great routes, and they're going to do what they need. And suddenly we've seen just this emergence of Cade Stover, the pass catcher. A couple of huge games, especially in terms of Ohio State tight ends so far this season. But McCord just can't let the enormity of the situation engulf him. He has to approach it just like it's another game. I mean, and that's not always an easy thing to do. And the whole lead in of everything else. And we're actually, today is going to be the first day that we get to talk to Kyle McCord in quote unquote midweek interviews. I mean, this is going to be a big deal. So we're going to learn a lot, like right out of the gate.
Quarterback play, McCord, Steve?
Yeah, I think you got to be excited to see what this guy does in his first matchup game. And he really has never played under the gun against a comparable opponent. Anytime he would have played against a ranked team previously, it would have been, in the fourth quarter with the game already decided. He never had to go in a moment of concern, for CJ Stroud. So he's in a spot here, and we're going to see how he responds and how, in the course of 2 years as the starter, he's got this year and next year, he might play in anywhere between 8 and 12 of these type matchup games against a top 10, top 15 opponent. And his legacy is going to be decided on how he performs in these games. The trajectory of this team's season is certainly going to be decided in part by what happens in this game. Last year, Ohio State got into the playoff in part because they beat Notre Dame early in the season and had that impressive non-conference win, such as it was, 21-10, over a Notre Dame team that ended up, I think, 9-4, I think was their final record after they won their bowl game. I look at it and I feel like there's going to be so much made of what he does in this game. I think the last two games, actually, he's played pretty well, Youngstown State and Western Kentucky, but this is obviously a much more difficult challenge. I mean, I'm watching the Notre Dame Central Michigan game here right now on Peacock, and number one, Javonte Jean-Baptiste for Notre Dame is a former Ohio State player, was a backup, and he has stepped right into a pretty good role on the defensive line. He's going to be coming, to take Kyle McCord's head off, in literally or figuratively, not literally. And so, these guys from Notre Dame are going to be coming for him, and he's got to show the poise in the pocket to step up and get the ball out to Marvin Harrison and Mecca Igbukah, Cade Stover, and all these other athletes. So, he's going to have to deal with the pressure. He haven't seen anything like what's coming on Saturday between the crowd, the pass rush, the coverage, all going to be at a new level for this guy.
I tend to size things up like this, especially when we don't have many data points, but we know what the talent is on the field. And I certainly believe in recruiting rankings and mass volume. And I believe Ohio State's a decidedly more talented team, not significantly, decidedly. I don't think it's debatable. We go back to the quarterback position, and so I'm going to weigh probabilities. Kyle McCord could wilt under pressure. And when I say pressure, I mean emotional, mental pressure of the scene and the stage. Physical pressure, they all melt under physical pressure to some to some extent. Obviously, some quarterbacks are able to shrug off, a hit or shrug off a hand in their face and be able to concentrate and deliver the football, and they're just that good. But even Tom Brady, if he's sitting on his rear end, cannot beat a defense downfield. But my concern for Kyle McCord in Ohio State, and again, this is just conjecturing because we don't know what's between his ears, is when Sam Hartman, who's had 45 career starts, I don't know exactly what the number is, it's going to be something in that range. Let's say Ohio State gets pressure on him in the first quarter, and then Notre Dame figures it out. He's not going to hear footsteps, you wouldn't think, because of his experience. He's going to take each play as it is, and when he's got a comfortable pocket or reasonable protection, he's going to deliver and not be affected. As Kyle McCord, as a young player, if he gets pressure for 4 or 5 consecutive dropbacks, and then the next one's clean, that he may start to get in his head, and then kind of fast forward that to the final couple drives of the fourth quarter. If this is a shootout and it's 45-42 and Kyle McCord's been slinging it all over the place, but he's got to score a touchdown, let's say they're down 4 with 2 minutes left, but he's thrown for 410 and 4 touchdowns. Well, he's going to be in his groove, obviously, and have that confidence that he can get it done. But if it's a slugfest and he's down 14-10 and they're only in the game because of the defense and he's thrown for $140 and he's at 45% completion percentage, then I'm going to somewhat question whether he's going to have the confidence to lead a team down the field in the final minute to get the job done.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think one of the things that I've come to see through the years is whenever we think a game is going to be a slobber knocker and it's going to be 14-10, it goes the other way and vice versa. I go back to the 06 Michigan game. We all thought that was going to be, it was a couple of top 5 defenses, 1-2 in the nation, et cetera, et cetera. And, we get whatever it was, 40, 42, 39. I mean, so it's going to be, a physical game and a mental game, and just how does he respond? And if Kyle has to be a de facto leader as the quarterback, but who's going to be there to kind of pick Kyle up if he has his struggles? I mean, sure, you're going to get your coaching on the sideline, and you're going to have, Corey Dennis on the headset, and you're going to have all of that going on. But, we're going to learn a lot about what Ohio State 2023 is in this game, because there are going to be a lot of similar challenges, certainly at the end of the season. I'm not necessarily sold on Wisconsin yet, but they have a couple few more games before Ohio State has to go there and play at Camp Randall. Everybody seems to be in love with Penn State and its offense right now. I mean, granted, Penn State hasn't necessarily played a murderer's row either. I mean, very few teams have the kind of win out there that a Texas or a Florida State has. But I'm really interested, just from a subplot point, to see what Kyle's demeanor is. Does he come out like on fire, and does he have to get calmed down? I mean, how are his first throws? I mean, is he putting it right there in the window for his guys, or is he throwing high or throwing low? I mean, there's gonna be a lot with that. But what will certainly help all of that, and that is that the offensive line plays its best game, namely on the left side.
And that's where I was going to go next, Steve. Is that still the biggest concern, offensive line holding up?
Well, they did a little better last week. Josh Simmons, lots been talked about with him at left tackle, and he almost made it through the game without a penalty. I think he had a false start in the second half just to make sure that he still was able to keep his union card, there in the second half as an offender, a weekly offender. But in all seriousness, I think what Justin Fry, the offensive line coach, spoke to us after we did this show last week on Wednesday night, and he said he wanted to see his guys play with more violence. And I think everybody in Buckeye Nation was clamoring for that, given the patty cake nature of the first 2 weeks, where they were tentative and didn't seem to know who they were supposed to hit. Well, against Western Kentucky, they came out, moved people off the ball, rushed for over 200 yards finally, and, did a little bit better. Notre Dame's a little bit susceptible, I think. Of course, Navy, that's all they do is run the football. They ran it pretty well against Notre Dame, even though they didn't score any touchdowns. And a couple of the other teams that they've played have also had a little bit of a success against the Notre Dame defense. So I kind of look at it. We did a show yesterday, and this was kind of how I put it. On a scale of 1 to 10, with Sam Hartman running the offense for Notre Dame, so far through 4 games, given the caliber of their opponents, I'd say their offense is probably an 8.5. Really good, but we just don't know how great just yet. Ohio State's defense has played outstanding, and yet who have they played? Western Kentucky can throw it all over the field. Indiana and Youngstown State were playing offense from the fetal position. Please don't kill us. Please don't kill us. Please don't kill us type thing. So they weren't even tested in those 2 games. So I put the Ohio State defense at like an 8. So I think that's one hell of a matchup right there. When you put, the Ohio State defense against the Notre Dame offense, something's got to give on that. On the other side, I think the Ohio State offense probably like a 7. Just all the pieces haven't clicked in there. You think it can be great, but can they do it against a great opponent? I don't know, maybe 7.5. And I think the Notre Dame defense, to be all honesty, to be completely honest with you, the first two games, Navy and Tennessee State, you kind of have to throw those away. There was a stretch in the NC State game where they were dominant, although they did give up about 24 points, I think, in that game. And then this past week, they gave up a couple touchdowns to Central Michigan. I put them about a 7 as well. I'd give the Ohio State offense just the slightest of edge. So in the two matchups, I'm giving the offense just the slightest of edges, and who can exploit that edge, and who can, or of the two defenses, who can overcome that edge and do enough to put their team in position to win the game. That's kind of how in my mind I've thought about it, knowing that neither team's played anybody yet.
All right, folks, as you can see there, Ohio State Notre Dame watch party on the main channel. So watch it with me, and we will take you through the Buckeyes and the Irish. In the meantime, get to BuckeyeHuddle.com with Kevin. The Big Me podcast, the tail of the tape released later. What time, Kevin?
Sometime on Thursday. I'm woefully behind on it. I've written about maybe a quarter of it, and I really kind of want to catch a little bit more. I mean, I haven't started the Central Michigan game. I want to see a little bit more of that, and then I'll put down. I have an idea. I have like a rough outline of what I want, but yeah, it's definitely going to be Thursday.
Steve on Bucknuts.com, 247 Sports. Any other appearances this week, Steve?
Well, I'll say I'm working on my game data page, which is kind of my big prediction counter to what Kevin does. And I haven't got one word really done yet. Usually I try and release it on Wednesday, but it'll probably be in the morning on Thursday, if not later tonight. The picks, I'm going to do picks on Thursday, and I was just jotting down here 6 games matching ranked teams this week. It's the most in a September Saturday. I think the rivalry weeks sometimes in November will have more, obviously, when a lot of the rivalries match up ranked teams. But the last time there were this many in a weekend in September was in 2006, when there were 7 games this same week 3, 4, whatever, in 2006, and I guess it would have been week 4, and so many great games. I want to get to a place at South Bend on Saturday and watch, some of these other games like Rutgers and Michigan. I mean, I don't think Rutgers is very good, even though they've, beaten Northwestern, Temple, and Virginia Tech. I mean, my God, what is that? 3 Power 5 wins for them already? Or no, Temple's not Power 5, but that's pretty good for Rutgers. But Michigan's kind of been a little bit wonky, so I want to see that. Plus, so many other great games. But as far as what else I'm doing, I will be doing a segment with Spectrum Sports. I'll probably air tomorrow on Spectrum News 1 is what they call it. And then I will be appearing on Channel 4 here in Columbus, the Big Ohio Football Show, 7:30 p.m. Friday night. They're doing a big preview of the game, and certainly I'll be on there. So those are my 2 big things right now.
Any facets of this game or any players for Ohio State that are either incoming transfer guys that we've seen play, but obviously this is going to be their first big game, or any under the radar guys that we could see breaking through and making an impact that aren't necessarily at the top of people's minds?
I mean, this isn't necessarily going to be a game of where we're going to have somebody playing that we weren't expecting to play. So, I would say maybe somebody on the defensive line, just because they rotate so many guys. I mean, that's really the spot of where you see a lot of, extra bodies. I mean, could a Kenyatta Jackson be somebody who has a big impact as he kind of rotates in the end rotation, or could maybe, somebody other than a Mike Hall or Tyleik Williams at defensive tackle step up? I mean, how about Caden Curry going back to his home state to go play at Indiana? I mean, he's somebody who could potentially be that guy. I mean, offensively, sure, you could throw out like a Carnell Tate as somebody at receiver, but again, it's a case of you're trying to keep guys fresh. You're trying to roll guys in. If you go out there and you run 40 yards full speed and you don't get the ball thrown to you, you might come off for a play to get your win back. Maybe a Carnell Tate, and then I'll throw out maybe somebody like a G. Scott Jr., an additional tight end could have a really big game. I don't know how much Ohio State necessarily is going to be throwing to a second tight end, but it certainly could happen.
Yeah, Kevin had a great list, and I would reiterate or agree with all of that. I think what I'll say as we're waiting on Tim to join us here from Irish Illustrated, what I will say is Ohio State will play Travion Henderson and Chip Trianum at running back with a little bit of Mayan Williams sprinkled in, maybe down on the goal line. So those are your three running backs. Brian Hartline doesn't want to bring any of his top three wide receivers, Marvin Harrison, Emeka Buka, Julian Fleming, off the field, although Carnell Tate, after catching a touchdown last week against Western Kentucky, could be a guy. Cade Stover, G. Scott Jr. Are the tight ends. Jelani Thurman got a little bit of a look last week because Joe Royer was out, but I doubt they put a freshman in this situation other than late in the game. Over on defense, Jim Knowles, if it's an important play, assume that Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau will be in at defensive end. Certainly the two linebackers are never coming off the field, Tommy Eichenberg and Steele Chambers. Lathan Ransom, Josh Proctor at safety are never coming off the field, and Denzel Burke is rarely coming off the field at corner. So those are your core niche top guys on both sides, and the coaches are very much stubborn that those guys are going to play every meaningful snap. So it's kind of hard to find that unheralded guy. I agree with Kevin. Perhaps it'll be one of the defensive tackles. Mike Hall had a big game against Notre Dame last year. Maybe Kenyatta Jackson or Caden Curry coming off the bench at defensive end. But the opportunities for the unheralded dudes, dude, that was Western Kentucky. That ain't this week. You put your frontline guys out there and you live and die with them.
Ohio State Notre Dame watch party with me on the main channel. Join me and we will watch this one together. We got Tim O'Malley here to break down the Notre Dame side, Irish Illustrated. Tim, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
Well, we saw these two get together last year, Tim, in a game that was competitive. Certainly, Ohio State put it away with two Mayan Williams-centered drives in the fourth quarter. And now we've got a much different looking Notre Dame team. For people that don't even follow the team that closely, know the name Sam Hartman and know the dimension that he brings is probably the best Notre Dame quarterback since, for me, it's Brady Quinn. Talk about the difference in Notre Dame offensive philosophy and approach in this one.
Yeah, it's so obvious. Even Marcus Freeman had to admit it in a Monday press conference, which never happens. He said he kind of admitted last year he wanted to play that game close to the vest. It was Tyler Buckner's first career start. It's pretty obvious as the game progressed. It was Tyler Buckner's first career start, and they were huddling. They were taking time in the huddle. They were running the ball. They were happy to punt at times to keep it close. That's not going to be the approach today or on Saturday. They'll have to play some complimentary football, though. Notre Dame's offensive line is good, but it's not the type of thing that usually will totally control the game. If Ohio State fans watched Notre Dame once last year after that game, it might have been against Clemson when they did indeed control that Clemson defensive front, which was a huge surprise last year. The line lost two 23-year-old guards from that. It's a good line. I mean, it's still a very good line, but I think Notre Dame is going to have to attack and get some chunk plays. So it's the opposite of last year, really, Notre Dame offensively. Sam Hartman's in his 50th start. We used to watch practices and hope Tyler Buckner could complete a couple slants in a row. Now you're watching an actual college quarterback who will, one day play in the NFL, pending where he's drafted. But Sam Hartman is their best quarterback since Brady Quinn for sure. Jimmy Clausen was very good one year, but the team wasn't very good.
Tim, this is Steve, by the way, and
Yes,
Kevin is above me.
Yep.
I guess, from the Notre Dame standpoint, not being in a conference and yet trying to get into the college football playoff, still just 4 teams this year, And it's sad that in this era that everything kind of is contingent on the fact that either you won the national championship or you didn't. And I don't know, in that overall thought, I mean, Notre Dame's going to play USC certainly later on and will have opportunities to prove itself throughout the course of the season. But just from their standpoint, how much pressure is on Marcus Freeman? The team's moved up into the top 10, and on the basis of 4 wins. Before you came on, I said I think NC State's probably an 8-4 team. The others, Navy, Tennessee State, and Central, are nothing. Just I guess what's your thought? I mean, what does this game at Ohio State? It's like if they lose this game, people are going to jump off of a bridge, forgetting the fact that Ohio State can still run the table and get in the playoff at 12-1. For Notre Dame, those opportunities are fewer and far between.
Yeah, Notre Dame. They might have taken it's interesting because they played undefeated Duke coming up after this game, and Notre Dame fans were happy Duke beat Clemson. Looking at the season, we looked at Notre Dame's schedule and thought, all right, you have top 5 Ohio State, you have top 10 USC, which is now number 6, and you have top 10 Clemson, which has fallen out. Now, Clemson obviously can get back in. They have Florida State coming up. The Ohio State game is Notre Dame's best chance at a statement game. They also need Notre Dame Clemson to be a one-loss team when Notre Dame faces Clemson. The interesting thing about Ohio State is, and just how this schedule works, I cannot remember Notre Dame's schedule like this in my life of 35, 40 years of watching them, where the best team they've played through 4 games is, you are correct, going to be 8-4 NC State. I mean, normally you have Michigan, you have Ohio State, you have Nebraska, you have somebody you've put a rivalry game like Michigan State would be in there. Right now, Notre Dame plays undefeated Ohio State, undefeated Duke, should be undefeated. Undefeated Louisville, should remain undefeated, and undefeated USC unless Dion gets them in a row. So that is their statement. Ohio State through USC. If they run that, you can lose 1 game at Clemson, but you have to run that. I think you need to beat Ohio State, because even losing to Ohio State, say you lose a great game, fall to 14. You beat number 5 USC. I still think beating Ohio State is the statement game nationally, that Notre Dame beats Ohio State. It's been so long. I obviously don't play all the time, but that would be more of a statement game. It's kind of like when they played Georgia a couple years ago. Notre Dame had a really good year, but that was the statement game. You have to be able to win at Georgia. You have to be able to beat Georgia at your own place. I think this is the one that matters most. It's just it's interesting because Clemson's loss was the other game where you look, if you're playing 3 top 10 teams, and you go 2-1 against them, you should be at least number 5 in the number 4 conversation going in. Now I feel like this is the main one. Could you then lose to Caleb Williams? Well, if USC goes 12-0 and wins the Pac-12, you probably can. But they got to get one of these, and I feel like the Ohio State one's more of a statement than Notre Dame USC, because Notre Dame beats USC more often than they don't.
Hey, Tim, first of all, tell Jack Freeman to get off his lazy ass, or I will. But when I'm looking at the Notre Dame roster, there's not necessarily that top tier, top name receiver. It seems to be receiver by committee. How would you kind of describe the receiver position? And if you're, if you're an Ohio State fan going into this who hasn't watched a lot of Notre Dame, I mean, who would you have eyes on?
So it is receiver by committee. You're absolutely right. I think redshirt sophomore Jaden Thomas, number 83, is the most consistent player. He will play the most snaps because he's also their best blocking wide receiver. The fan favorite is Tobias Merriweather, number 5, and he's the one that looks like he should have gone to Ohio State when he walks in the wide receivers room, because he's 6'4.5", and he just looks like he's in the NFL already, but he is not polished. However, he is actually playing because he's a good blocker as well. They're really relying on the running game. The 2 guys that no fans would know outside of Notre Dame are 2 true freshmen, and they've worked their way into the rotation. It's number 19, Jaden Greathouse. He was Cade Klubnik's wide receiver, actually at Westlake High School in Texas in the state championship team, true freshman. And then Rico Flores from California is a true freshman, number 17. So 17 and 19 are the up-and-coming guys for Ohio State fans to watch. Jaden Thomas doesn't come off the field often because he's a bigger receiver in that he can play slot, so it's almost like you have a second tight end there, but he's also plays to the boundary. He's caught a couple deep balls from Hartman already this year. He had a 38-yarder there against Central Michigan. Interestingly enough, he is the one of this group that did not play well against NC State, which we have talked about as the best defense Notre Dame has faced. So that would be a cause for concern, I think, for some Notre Dame fans, that when he was faced with a really quality corner, that was his worst game. He kind of dropped a perfectly placed bomb early in that game, and I don't think it wasn't a drop as much as a definite should have caught. You know how those work when you're running full speed and it hits you in the hands on the outside shoulder. I think he maybe lost a little bit of faith. Hartman might have lost a little faith in that game and looked elsewhere. But those are the four guys to watch. The emerging player is, they usually have one at tight end, is Holden Stays, number 13. He has 4 touchdowns in the last 3 games, a couple of long ones against NC State. But it is 100% receiver by committee, and it will be all year. I don't think if Jaden Thomas goes out and gets 100 yards against Ohio State, it doesn't mean I think he's going to get more than 45 at Duke. It's just that's not where they are right now. There is no Harrison. There is no Golden Tate, if you want to go, or Will Fuller. They don't have that right now. I think Greathouse and Flores are the help for the future that Notre Dame would have that if Ohio State and Notre Dame meet in a playoff game in a couple of years.
You know, I look at this game, and before you came on, I mentioned that the matchups with Ohio State's defense against Notre Dame's offense seems to be pretty even based on what we've seen. Ohio State's defense is much improved from a year ago. Got killed, obviously, in the losses to Michigan and Georgia, but seemed to have shored up a lot of those issues. I mean, those guys who were sophomores are now juniors with Denzel Burke and some of the other guys. And then on the other side, I look at Notre Dame's offense as maybe just a half step ahead of I'm getting them backwards. Ohio State's offense maybe just a half step ahead of what Notre Dame's defense has shown so far. So I guess when you look at those two matchups, do you give one side a decided edge, or are those two matchups, offense versus defense, pretty even in your eyes?
I think they're pretty even. I like Ohio State's defense more than Notre Dame's offense. I think Notre Dame's defense is a little – now I like Ohio State's offense versus most teams, but I think Notre Dame's defense is in a similar situation to Ohio State's in that this is Al Golden's second year, and he has 9 of the guys back playing in his second year. Jim Knowles, this is his second year. All the guys grew in that system. I mean, things are so much different than when these guys played in game 1. That was Jim Knowles and Al Golden's first game calling defenses for these schools. Now they're veterans in it. With Eichenberg and Steele Chambers, you have linebackers at Ohio State that can completely run the show. With Bertrand, Leofau, and Kaiser, you have 3 graduate student linebackers that have started for 3 years that completely run the show. The secondary at Notre Dame it's experience, but the real key is the younger players are better than the experienced players. That's probably not a great thing, but Benjamin Morris in the corner, it's one of the better matchups Marvin Harrison will have this year. Cam Hart is a 5th-year senior. He was there last year. They have safeties that have played. They have one safety he's their 6th defensive back now, Clarence Lewis, that started in the playoff game against Alabama. Seems like a very long time ago during COVID, but he's been around that long. So it's an experienced group. The question I have, and in the spring, I looked at the front 7, or excuse me, at the front 4, and I thought they have 8 really good backups. That was not a compliment because I wasn't talking about the 8 backups. I was talking about the 2 deep, 8 really good backups. I think it's a little better than that now, but my proof is NC State. It's a little different than Ohio State, right? So Howard Cross, the starting nose tackle, is undersized and very good. His backup, Jason Onye, I think is very good. Riley Mills is a guy that's supposed to be a star. I just think he's pretty good. Javonte Jean-Baptiste really flashed the last couple games, but you guys know Javonte Jean-Baptiste. Is he a star or is he a quality player that can help you out? So that's the matchup for me. Can those 8 guys, and they do rotate 8, that's what helps a little bit. They are always fresh. Can those 8 guys hold up against a bigger Ohio State line and the 3-headed monster at running back? Because they have to maybe more than hold up because it's so hard to win on the outside versus the wide receivers, if that makes sense. You can't let Ohio State dictate. There was something last year when you watched that game, and it seemed like such a defensive struggle, for 3 quarters until the double safety blitz touchdown was scored by Ohio State there to end the 3rd quarter. Notre Dame fans do not like double safety blitzes, by the way, because of that play. But I went back and I tracked Ohio State's first down rushes. They had 16 rush attempts against Notre Dame on first down. 14 were efficient runs. It doesn't seem like it because they weren't 12-yard runs, but they were 4 and 5 and 5 and 6 and 4. And that allows the passing attack and the running game to balance out. That is going to be trouble for Notre Dame if it happens again. They have to have an inefficient first down, Ohio State, for Notre Dame to be able to make the new matchup against McCord matter. Didn't really matter as much when it's CJ Stroud, because when he needed to come through, he came through. It's going to be a little bit tougher for Ohio State, obviously, under center this time.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of touched upon what my next question was going to be about Notre Dame's secondary, because going into the year, everybody was saying, well, we just don't know what the back end is going to look like. Yet Notre Dame, what leads the nation in defensive pass efficiency. Which is it? I mean, and obviously we can sit there and we can, oh, well, they played Navy. Well, Navy doesn't throw the ball. I mean, Central Michigan isn't a team that I necessarily think of as a great thrower, but NC State with former Virginia quarterback
Brennan Armstrong.
Armstrong, you would have expected more. And I watched the game, and I watched it from home, so I wasn't there in the slog and the rain and the crap that was going on there. But which is more true? Is it that no, this secondary is performing better than maybe what expectations were, or is it they just haven't necessarily had that test?
Well, the interesting thing here is at the end of camp, people that were at Notre Dame practices, the media, we all rank the corners as the best unit on the team. However, they have not faced a quarterback that matters much. Brennan Armstrong is fine. He's a good runner. He's a cagey player. They did not have many threats outside. You can throw away the Tennessee State, Central Michigan, and Navy passing attacks completely. In fact, Central Michigan has a bad passing attack. They have not. They're number one in the country, number one because bad opponents so far they have faced. However, Benjamin Morrison and Cam Hart are probably their best combo. There was a good combo there in the 18 season, went to the playoff with the Julian Love and Troy Pride, 2 second-round, third-round draft picks. But they actually have backups now that can come in the game. Last year when Tariq Bracy hurt his ankle for one play, he was their nickelback. He came out, it was the double safety blitz touchdown against Notre Dame, against a true freshman like that. Now they actually they go too deep at every position. So I love Notre Dame's corners. I like their safeties. I do not believe they will be number one in pass efficiency defense when this game ends, because they're facing a team that is going to threaten them. But they can actually withstand Ohio State, whereas last year going to the game, I picked Notre Dame to play well, but lose 34-24 last year because I just thought, well, it's going to cave in at some point with the secondary. Like, that's how you looked at it. The secondary was going to cave in against CJ Stroud and those guys last year. They didn't really. They gave up one big play. It was actually the offense that couldn't do a single thing against Ohio State. So this is going to be the best corners that Ohio State faces this season. I know you've never heard that before in your life from a Notre Dame media person that was being honest. This is their best secondary. Their best collection of 4 corners. They have a nickel and Thomas Harper from Oklahoma State, a graduate transfer. So Jim Knowles would know him well, actually. This is their best collection back there in terms of depth in a while. However, it's a different situation. You can say anything you want about Brennan Armstrong. Brennan Armstrong is a cagey football player. He was not going to beat them with the pass. And remember, the weather was terrible. Sam Hartman threw some nice passes. Sam Hartman's a much better player than Brennan Armstrong. But they have not faced anything like they're going to face in Ohio State. And they also have USC coming up. So if Notre Dame goes into the Clemson game with 1 loss and they're a top 4 pass efficiency defense in the country, remember that I said their corners are really good, because they still have to go against Caleb Williams, Ohio State, and Duke obviously now has a pretty good attack.
Tim, you probably get inundated with this on a daily basis. And certainly correct me or steer me in a different direction if I'm not quite nailing this. But I do think that for most people that root for an elite program, and I will put Notre Dame in the category of elite, even though I don't believe the results have been elite since Lou Holtz, but it's obviously historically an elite, arguably the best. That there's a chip on the shoulder of the typical Ohio State fan, Notre Dame fan, Alabama fan, that they don't want to hear that any other program's better than they are. And Notre Dame has obviously not succeeded in these games, both regular season and postseason, in a long time. At times, they're close. The Georgia game at home in 2017, and we can mention a few others, the Ohio State game last year. Sometimes they get blown off the field. I got to think that this fan base, well, I see it here, and we just have a small semblance of Notre Dame followers here, that this fan base, even though this is only Marcus Freeman's second year and there's a lot of grace given because of the honeymoon and people love him that wear the Notre Dame colors, that this fan base is ready to explode, whether that be in jubilation or in angst to say, when are we going to break through?
Yeah, it's a good point. Now, it's a little different because Notre Dame had 3 losses last year, but they did beat number 4, 10-0 Clemson last year at Notre Dame. I mean, that was a pretty big deal for Notre Dame. Clemson, I did not think was the 4th best team in the country last year. However, if we're always going to go back and look at top 10 rankings and stuff, not all those teams are where they belong either. So that was one that gave a lot of faith in Marcus Freeman. And this is a segue, but I need to take 5 seconds on it. If Notre Dame didn't win that game, do you know what else happened that night in college football? Brian Kelly beat Alabama. Can you imagine? Notre Dame did not beat Clemson, and Brian Kelly beat Alabama. So when you say grace period, Marcus Freeman got his grace period by beating Clemson there. But you're absolutely right. There is, I would say, all Notre Dame fans will be fed up and not going to take it anymore, screaming from the rooftops if they lose to both Ohio State and USC. I think many Notre Dame fans are just so desperate for a win over a team like Ohio State in this situation, because that catapults Notre Dame directly number 5 in the country. USC is probably number 4 when they come in. This is changing the season game for Notre Dame, as Steve pointed out. Ohio State can rechange their season by running through the Big Ten, beating Michigan, winning the Big Ten championship game. Most Notre Dame fans are dying for a win, but I think it's 2 losses that would really crush Notre Dame fans, because they have these 2 opportunities in a month. And I mean, as much as Notre Dame wants to beat Ohio State, there is still a segment of those traditional fans that have actually seen a national title that would like to beat USC every year too, especially after what Caleb Williams did to them last year. So this crowd, because of Marcus Freeman and because of the belief they have after Clemson last year, is going to be much different than what you would have seen if this was Brian Kelly's 12th year. And it seems so strange to say it, because Brian Kelly in his last 6 years won 10, 12, 11, 11, 11. I mean, he was doing very well. He made 2 playoffs out of 3 years. But Notre Dame needed to change. They were very happy about the change after it happened. Obviously not how it happened. And they've accepted Freeman because of it. And he's a likable guy. So he has a little grace. Clemson gave him a lot more grace than being likable. Marshall really killed a little bit of that likability factor probably for Notre Dame fans last year. But this is a huge opportunity for Notre Dame. And I think the fan base knows it. I think you have to be ignorant of how good Ohio State is to say Notre Dame has to win this game. But it is a situation like, if not now, when? I can appreciate that argument for sure, because, we looked at this in June. It was a 7.5-point spread, 8.5-point spread. That's looking at the programs. Vegas looked at the programs and the rosters. Now you're looking at the teams, and it's a 3.5-point spread. You think, if not now, when? When are you going to get Ohio State or a team like that in this situation?
I've already thrown this theory at Kevin and Steve. When we don't know much about the 2 teams, we know what the talent is, and we can go that direction as well. Whether you think, let me start there. I'm going to throw this one out there. Ohio State is either on par with or maybe a shade below Georgia and Alabama in terms of recruited talent, if you believe in the recruiting rankings.
Right.
Notre Dame's a solid top 10. That doesn't sound on the surface like a big deal, but we all understand the recruiting rankings and the points and how it just falls off a cliff after like 3, 4, 5, that it's decided. Do you believe in that disparity?
No, I do. The one thing I believe about recruiting rankings is 10 5-stars are better than 10 4-stars are better than 10 3-stars. And that's what you're dealing with Georgia versus Notre Dame, is 10 5-stars versus 1 5-star. When Georgia goes out, and Georgia doesn't need J.D. Bertrand, a low top 300, number 298, number 300 ranked linebacker, to hit and become a 3-year starter. Notre Dame needed it. Notre Dame needs guys like that to hit. And it happens. They do it all the time. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was a 3-star. If Georgia had Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and he didn't hit, it wouldn't matter at all. They'd have somebody else that would come in and do that. But it does matter at Notre Dame. I think the designation is true. I think right now Georgia is ahead of Ohio State in recruiting. Georgia is just ridiculous at this point, like Alabama was for years. But it's always, to me, been Georgia and Alabama, or Alabama and Georgia. Flip it now. Ohio State right there. Nice solid gap. And then Notre Dame is one of the better programs that recruits well. I mean, Texas A&M recruits great, and they're not anywhere near as good of a program as Notre Dame or Michigan or anything like that. It's Clemson recruits well, they're a better program than Notre Dame over the last 10 years because they have 2 national titles and have appeared in other things. But Notre Dame's recruiting a little better than Clemson right now. The real key for Notre Dame is they have had playoff level rosters. I don't mean 10 out of 10 years, but I mean more than 2 out of 10 years. And they have not had a playoff level quarterback. It has just not been the case. I mean, Deshaun Kaiser for 1 year, his redshirt freshman year, was a playoff level fringe quarterback. When Ohio State beat Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl, he was a quality quarterback that year. But then you got to go back to Jimmy Clausen's 1 year and Brady Quinn. Brady Quinn, I mean, that's 2005 and 2006. We shouldn't be referencing those names. Ian Book, I mean, God love him. He got Notre Dame to 2 playoffs. But I don't think anyone looked at Ian Book in any of those playoffs and thought, well, Ian Book's the difference maker here. I mean, there was Trevor Lawrence involved in these games. There was Bryce Young involved in these games. It's not even close to what the quarterbacks Ian Book was up against in 18 and 20. And Ohio State was involved in 20. You look at the 4 quarterbacks, you think, oh, how in the world did they get here with him? That it's just been a huge difference. And I think Sam Hartman is giving people, if it's 1 year, Sam Hartman is giving people a lot of belief right now because they have a playoff level quarterback.
I have one more, and I'll leave it up to, we want to respect your time, of course, Tim, if you need to run, but I'll leave it up to Kevin and Steve. But one other thing I wanted to hit you with that I kind of mentioned to these two already. Sam Hartman, as you mentioned, has started 50 games. There's not going to be much that he hasn't seen from the standpoint of the big stage. Even though he played at Wake, he played Clemson every year. So in terms of competition as well on the field, Kyle McCord is, it's a new experience almost every week for him. And now it's hostile environment for the first time and a level defense that he's never seen before, except in practice. So the conventional thought is that the pressure can't get to Sam Hartman. The physical pressure, sure, gets to any quarterback. If they're on their backside, they're not going to win. But in terms of anything getting between his ears, that Sam Hartman should be able to just shrug it off, while Kyle McCord, I'm not going to say that he can't, that he doesn't have that mojo or that mentality, but we just don't know. So it's kind of a wild card. And the probability is that it's going to possibly be an issue with him.
Well, it has to be for Notre Dame. I think for Notre Dame to win the game, Sam Hartman has to be the better quarterback on this field. It's a rare thing. We're talking about that in Ohio State Notre Dame game, but Hartman has to be the better quarterback. If he's not, how does Notre Dame pull off this upset if Sam Hartman plays even with McCord? I don't see that happening. Now, it's funny, as you were talking, I thought back to the Notre Dame Georgia game where there was a first-time starting freshman named Jake Fromm, and we're like, well, he's going to get rattled at Notre Dame, and Jake Fromm did not get rattled at Notre Dame, and it wasn't a good offensive game, but Jake Fromm didn't get rattled, and Georgia pulled out the win by 1 point. If McCord channels C.J. Stroud in the 4th quarter last year, Notre Dame would be in trouble, I think. But that's the hope, is that you can rattle McCord. Guys start somewhere, though, right? Great quarterbacks start somewhere. They have a breakout game when they're young somewhere, and it's not like he's a true freshman that's never been out there before. So I would expect him to play well. Now, DJ Uyunglele, his first time at Notre Dame was absolutely phenomenal. He almost beat Notre Dame in double overtime. DJ came in last year and was destroyed by Notre Dame. And Cade Club, they replaced him with Cade Klubnik at the 5-star, and he walked in and he threw the ball right to Benjamin Morrison for an interception, the 2 true freshmen. So you don't know how they're going to handle it. I would expect Sam Hartman to settle in at some point in this game. Jitters might be natural even for Sam Hartman, though. Notre Dame, Ohio State is not Wake Forest and Florida State. I just don't feel that way. I think his jitters have to be there because the weight of the world is on his shoulders too. I just think he's the guy, when he settles into a game, he's going to be fine. I wanted to correct myself real fast in case any Ohio State fan heard this. When I said that those are the 2 best corners these receivers are going to face, I meant until Sundays, because those receivers at Ohio State are obviously going to start facing better corners. But I am telling you, Benjamin Morrison, Cam Hart are very good college corners right now, and it's a fun matchup. The thing is, fun matchups kind of favor future first-round draft picks sometimes on the outside as well.
Kevin, Steve, anything else?
I think we've hit all the high points. I appreciate Tim coming on, and he does a great job with our Notre Dame site there, and their coverage is just outstanding of the Notre Dame program. So if you want to get the MO of what's happening with Notre Dame, tune them in, and that's one of the great benefits of being a subscriber 24/7 is you get access to all that coverage of the other colleges your team's playing. And this is a tremendous these guys are in the top 5, I think, in our network in terms of football coverage. And obviously they got a great product to cover. So I don't really have anything else. I see a close game. I've kind of been thinking 30-24 Ohio State, something like that. I don't want to go like Clemson, Notre Dame 44-41, although I could see something crazy like that breaking out, on a late night game there at South Bend. It can get a little crazy sometimes. We've seen a Michigan Notre Dame game get nutso like that there before. And, just different crazy things happen. But I don't know. I think there'll be some defense played in this one. And
I do too.
Yeah, I think that establishing the run is always going to be the thing. You made a great point about what you said about first down run. If Ohio State can get 4 yards a carry, 5 yards a carry on first down and make it easier on the young guy, McCord, to convert and move the chains, that's the whole world, really, when it comes right down. When you're not putting him in third in the first game, they were playing Indiana and making him try and convert 3rd and 11, because of the holding penalties and the tackles for loss in the run game and the different dumb BS that this is a young quarterback. Everybody else has to lift him up. You don't expect him to have to lift everybody else up. And that was the problem the first week and even into the second game. So they've gotten a lot of that figured out, it seems like.
Folks, you see Tim's Twitter handle. Join him there. Notre Dame fans, you should already be there. IrishIllustrated.com. Buckeye fans, make that a destination this week with Tim. You heard the obvious knowledge and insight. Should be a great read. IrishIllustrated.com. And again, Tim O'Malley, ND on Twitter. Tim, it was great stuff. We appreciate you stopping by.
Hey, thanks for having me on. When you guys get in town? Friday?
I'll be there Friday. I think I've already picked out a place to go. Let me see. You mentioned, you gave me some options. I think I'm going to go to Corn Dance Tavern. I think
there you go. Good stuff.
Yeah, I think that's where I want to go and have some food and watch the Friday games. And then O'Rourke's, I think, sounds like the place to be on Saturday if I can get in there. Do you think it'll be even at 12 o'clock for the early games? You think it'll be overrun by then?
You give it a shot at 12. It's pretty good. It's when you see the location, you're going to realize a lot of people.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Right in the corner, but
what would you say? Is it about a mile up to the stadium from there?
No. It's about 200 yards. It's fantastic.
Wow.
Spot. Yeah. No, that's why you want it. Yeah. that's why it's so excited though.
Yeah, we should get there at 11:30 then to get a seat to watch the 12 o'clock games. Then go park our car, go inside the stadium. Have a little bit of time, maybe walk around campus and enjoy. I mean, it's going to be a long day between 12 and 7:30, but it'll be there before we go.
You can park nearby, actually. If you had Innovation Park as your parking,
yep.
All right, that's within 100 yards of that spot. It's all right there. It's like a square.
Okay.
It'll be good.
Awesome.
Yep.
Tim, thank you so much. We
Thank you
appreciate
much,
it,
guys. All right, we'll see you.
Have a great week. All right, Kevin, thank you so much. Everybody, Tale of the Tape released on Thursday, BuckeyeHuddle.com. Big Mean Podcast with Kevin. Got to get there. This is the week to do it. Carry it on through the season. Steve at Bucknuts 247 Sports, of course. And we will see you next week for Buckeyes Live.